Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. You'd think 300 acres of Texas land would keep drama at bay, but when an iron-willed rancher clashes with a power-hungry HOA queen, fences won't be the only thing crossed. Secrets, sabotage, and one hell of a showdown. Welcome to the wildest suburban standoff you've never seen. You'd think that living on a 300-acre ranch in Texas would keep you safe from suburban nonsense. I've got cattle, fields, fences, and a view that rolls for miles, not cul-de-sacs and bake sales. But life has a funny way of proving that stupidity knows no borders. My name's Clay Harper, 46, born stubborn, and proud owner of Harper Ranch, land that's been in my family since the Great Depression. We never needed anyone's approval, and certainly not that of some homeowners association. But a few years back, a new development called Maple Estates cropped up next to my eastern fence line. At first, I didn't care. Let the HOA folks have their neatly trimmed lawns and passive-aggressive Facebook groups. I had cows to feed. Then came Karen Brooks, the HOA president, and a walking clipboard in heels, the kind of woman who probably has bylaws framed in her hallway and a laminated parking diagram for holiday guests. She showed up at my gate one afternoon like she owned the place. Tan blazer, aggressive smile, and a pamphlet titled The Benefits of Community Integration. "Clay," she said, like we were old friends, "I think it's time we brought your property under Maple Estates governance. You'd really benefit from being part of our community." I nearly laughed in her face. "Karen, the only thing I need from your community is distance. This is private land. It's never been under HOA rule, and it never will be." She didn't like that answer. Her left eye twitched, and she pursed her lips like she'd tasted vinegar. But she left. For the moment. That was the first knock. What followed were subtle but growing annoyances. Phony complaints to the county about noise from my tractor at dawn. Odor reports filed due to my cows. On a ranch, imagine that. And even a drone buzzing over my property. Probably HOA operated. Surveillance in the name of aesthetics. Then I noticed the HOA started holding their meetings closer and closer to my fence, almost like they were strategizing on how to absorb me into their tidy little empire. And I knew people like Karen didn't give up. She was waiting for a moment, a loophole, a chance to take control, so I started planning too. After the drone incident, I knew it was only a matter of time before Maple Estates and its queen bee Karen tried something bold. I've seen people like her before, the ones who confuse authority with ownership. She didn't just want my land under HOA jurisdiction, she wanted control over me. And that wasn't going to happen. But even I had to admit, paranoia can wear a man thin. So I called two people I trust more than anyone. My brother John, who also happens to be the deputy sheriff, and Ben Calloway, my lawyer since I was dumb enough to lease a field to a rodeo and ended up sued by a drunk clown. We sat out on the back porch, coffee steaming in mugs and cicadas whining in the grass. "You're setting up what now?" John asked, cocking a brow as I laid out the plans. Motion sensors at the gate, cameras hidden in fence posts, GSM alarm rigged to notify my phone the second something moved at either entrance. Ben sipped his coffee slowly, watching me with that face he makes when he's half impressed and half concerned I've been watching too many conspiracy shows. "Clay," he said, "you're either going to catch a raccoon or a lawsuit." "I'm telling you," I said, leaning forward, "Karen's not done. She wants me boxed in, forced into their HOA jurisdiction through some underhanded stunt. I can feel it. You don't get as far as she has without stepping on necks." John gave me a sideways look. "You sure this isn't just you being you? You've always been a bit, well, stubborn?" He shrugged. "Prepared, over-prepared." Ben shook his head. He's not wrong to prep. HOA tactics are getting more aggressive across the board. If they can't get you through law, they'll try pressure, public image, or outright obstruction. What you're doing might seem overboard, but it's smart. Just don't be the first one to draw blood. I nodded. That was never the plan. I wasn't looking for a fight, but if they brought one to my gate, I'd damn well be ready. So I finished the setup. 4 infrared cameras, concealed and silent. Ground sensors near the front drive and back path. Backup batteries, and offline storage, a spare exit through the back forest trail. And John's word, if anything moves at night, I'm on my way. No questions. Karen thought I was just some lone rancher with a bad attitude. She had no idea she was poking a man with patience, a plan, and a brother with a badge. It was exactly 2:17 a.m. when my phone lit up with a vibrating alert. Front gate motion, Zone 1 breach. I was out of bed before the second buzz, heart already thudding in my chest. I grabbed my phone and opened the security feed, expecting maybe a coyote or someone turning around in the drive. What I saw turned my blood cold, then hot. 3 figures, high-vis vests, heavy tools, flashlights cutting through the night like surgical knives. They were unloading concrete barriers, actual concrete, and dragging them across my main gate. One of them, the tallest, pulled out a heavy chain and wrapped it around the posts like he was shackling a prison door. Another set a padlock with a bright silver shine that made my jaw clench. But it was the fourth person, standing a few feet back, arms crossed, issuing orders, that really sent my blood pressure into orbit. Karen. Damn, Karen. In a silk robe, hair in curlers, holding a phone like she was live streaming the whole damn operation to some HOA cult meeting. She wasn't just behind it, she was orchestrating it. Tighter on the chain, she said. And center the blocks. It needs to look official, like a city order. Won't he notice by morning? One of the guys asked. Let him, she said coolly. He'll call. We'll tell him there's a pending safety review, fire risk, road erosion, whatever sounds serious. It'll take weeks to sort out. He'll beg to comply with HOA just to get out. I felt my hand tighten around the phone until my knuckles popped. There it was. The move I'd been predicting but praying wouldn't come. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a warning. It was a siege. For half a second, I just stood there, shirtless, barefoot, the cold air crawling over my skin like static, my stomach twisted, not with fear, but with fury. They were on my land, at my gate. In the middle of the damn night, like thieves. I dressed in 30 seconds flat, jeans, boots, flannel. Grabbed the keys to my old Ford, slung the radio receiver onto my belt, and slipped my Glock into the glove compartment, just in case this turned real ugly. But I didn't go through the front. That was theirs now. I backed out through the forest trail, the one I'd carved through the cottonwoods years ago, when a flood washed out the main road. Tires crunched soft under pine needles as I maneuvered the truck around the property line. Headlights off, adrenaline sharpening every motion. As I got closer, I killed the engine and let the truck roll down to a slow crawl. From this angle, I could see them clearer. Karen was pacing now, back and forth, whispering into her phone. The others were laughing, actually laughing, like this was some kind of game. And then it hit me. They thought they'd won. That knot in my stomach. It melted into something different, something steel, because I'd been waiting for this moment, the moment they crossed the line from nuisance to criminal. Now I had them, on camera, on record, in the act. I pulled out my phone and hit record on the live stream to the cloud. Then I called John. You're gonna want to get out here, brother, I said, my voice low, tight, vibrating with restrained rage. They're here, at the front gate. With blocks, chains, and Karen herself in a damn bathrobe. It's happening. There was no hesitation on the other end. I'm en route. Don't do anything stupid. I smiled grimly. I don't have to. I ended the call and leaned forward, eyes fixed on the scene below. The shadows of their plan stretched across the dirt, like the start of a bad dream. But I wasn't afraid. I was done with warnings. The trap had sprung. Now all I had to do was wait for the law to arrive. Blue lights sliced through the dark just as the last concrete block thudded into place. The sudden burst of sirens was like thunder cracking over an open field. My brother's cruiser barreled around the bend with 2 more deputies right behind him, gravel exploding under their tires. It was the sound of reckoning, and I savored every damn second. Karen turned just as the spotlight hit her. One heel twisted on the soft earth, and she nearly went down, flailing to stay upright. Her silk robe flapped behind her like a cape, though she looked less like royalty and more like a villain in a soap opera about to get written off. John stepped out of his cruiser, calm as a Sunday preacher, hand on his hip. Evening, folks, he said, voice dry as kindling. You want to explain what the hell you're doing on private property at 2:30 in the morning? Karen straightened like she'd rehearsed this. Deputy Harper, she began with that awful forced authority. This is an authorized safety closure. Temporary, of course. You're on my brother's land, John cut in, eyes narrowing. You poured concrete across his gate, chained it shut, and trespassed at night. So, unless you've got a city permit and divine intervention in your back pocket, I suggest you stop talking. The men with her froze. Greg, her husband, already sweating. Justin, the security guard, visibly trembling. And that snake Mark from the HOA board looking for a bush to crawl under. Karen, to her credit, tried to keep up appearances. "He's been violating our community traffic flow," she said, trying to regain footing, both literally and metaphorically. "We were protecting the neighborhood. His tractor noise at dawn has caused multiple complaints." "That's not your jurisdiction," I said, stepping into the light. "You don't get to decide who can leave their own property." John signaled to his deputies. "Get pictures. Measure everything. Secure the evidence. These blocks didn't move themselves." Karen's smile twitched. "This is ridiculous. You can't be serious." "I'm the HOA president." "You're not above the law, ma'am," one of the deputies replied, already reading her Miranda rights. And then, oh glorious justice, came the moment I'll be telling at family barbecues until I'm 90. Karen stepped backward to protest, and her heel caught the edge of the concrete block. Her foot gave out, and with a dramatic yelp she pitched forward, arms flailing, phone flying, and landed face first into a patch of good, honest Texas mud. Her scream was muffled by dirt. She thrashed like a fish on the bank, her silk robe now plastered with grime and grass. One of her heels came off and lodged between the concrete blocks like some poetic offering to the gods of property rights. The deputies didn't even smirk. Professionals, but I couldn't stop the grin curling at the edges of my mouth. "You okay down there, Madam President?" I asked, arms crossed. She didn't answer, just groaned and slapped at the mud with trembling hands as they helped her up. Robe hanging crooked, hair a disaster, pride shattered. Greg didn't speak at all. When they cuffed him, he looked more relieved than anything, like being arrested was easier than spending another day with her scheming. Justin tried to talk his way out of it. "I was just following orders. I thought this was a sanctioned." "You thought wrong," John snapped, snapping the cuffs shut. "You're part of this operation. You're responsible." Mark, to his credit, tried to run, made it 6 steps before Deputy Wilson took him down like a linebacker in a rodeo. When the 4 of them were lined up and locked in cruisers, John walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You weren't being paranoid," he said. I exhaled, a deep breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Nope, just ready." One of the deputies handed me Karen's phone, still recording. I pressed play. The last thing the camera had captured was her voice. "Make sure it's all chain tight. By morning, he'll have no way out." The irony tasted sweeter than morning coffee. The last cruiser pulled away down the dirt road, tires splashing through the same mud Karen had just eaten. I stood at the gate, hands in my pockets, looking at the mess they'd made. Chains, blocks, mud, arrogance, all of it finally caught in the act. And we were just getting started. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, HOA members, ranchers, curious townsfolk, everyone wanted to see how the showdown between a small-town rancher and the iron-fisted HOA queen would end. The tension in the air was thick enough to rope and brand. I stood beside my attorney, Ben Calloway, dressed in boots and a clean jacket, no tie. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to win. Karen sat at the defense table in a navy blue suit, at least one size too tight, her hair pulled back in a bun that looked like it was strangling her thoughts. She didn't look at me. Not once. But I saw the tremor in her hands when the bailiff called the court to order. The prosecution opened with fire. Exhibit A, the security footage. Exhibit B, the live-streamed phone audio where Karen instructed her HOA goons to make sure he can't get out by morning. Exhibit C, physical evidence of the gate's blockade, with her fingerprints on the padlock and Greg's truck logged making 2 cement deliveries in the HOA's name. Ben handled our case like a seasoned gunslinger, calm, precise, and deadly when needed. He showed every email Karen had sent pushing her narrative of quiet control. He subpoenaed HOA board meeting minutes where Mark had written, "The Harper property is a problem. If he won't come under us, we'll pressure him until he caves." And then came the witnesses. HOA residents. A landscaper Karen tried to bribe to tear up my back fence by accident. Even Justin, the hired guard, took the stand after flipping to save his own skin. Karen said it was already approved, that it was just a formality, locking him out until he got smart. She slumped in her seat as her own allies turned one by one. When she was finally called to testify, Karen walked to the stand like a dethroned monarch, still trying to keep her chin high, still thinking she could spin it. "I was simply trying to enforce standards," she said, voice tight. Our community has bylaws, and Mr. Harper's land affects our values, our peace. He runs tractors at dawn. There are cows, smells. Ben stood. Ms. Brooks, is it Maple Estates policy to enforce bylaws by illegally blocking someone's private driveway with construction materials at 2 in the morning? She hesitated. I may have overreached in implementation, but the intent was community protection. The judge leaned forward, deadpan. Is community protection what made you record a video of yourself saying, by morning, he'll have no way out? Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping in a desert. When final statements ended, the courtroom held its breath. I stared straight ahead, jaw tight, fingers laced in front of me. I wasn't angry anymore, not in that moment. I was tired. Tired of having to prove that my land, my rights, and my name still meant something. The verdict came down like thunder, guilty on all counts. Karen Brooks, convicted of criminal trespassing, conspiracy to commit property sabotage, and abuse of civil authority. 6 months in county jail, $50,000 fine, and a permanent ban from holding any HOA or community administrative position in the state. Greg Brooks, 3 months house arrest, mandatory community service, and a $20,000 fine. Mark Hollis disbarred, fined, and issued 2 years probation. Justin Green, fined and banned from working in private security for 5 years. The courtroom buzzed. One woman in the back gasped. Someone let out a low whistle. I just stood still, staring at the bench. It was over, and I had won. Karen, however, was unraveling like cheap thread. Her face flushed deep red. She shook her head over and over, whispering, "No, no, no." This wasn't supposed to happen. She stood abruptly, teetering on her heels. "I made that neighborhood," she cried. "You think any of those people would have lawns without me? You're all ungrateful." The judge slammed the gavel once. "Ms. Brooks." But she kept going. "I'm not the villain. He is. Clay Harper is a weed in our garden." And with that, she picked up a glass of water from the witness stand and hurled it across the courtroom. Missed everyone, of course, but splashed harmlessly against the wall. There was a stunned silence. Then the bailiff approached, firm but calm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down." "Don't touch me. This is my town. This is my HOA." She tried to storm out, and instead tripped over the leg of her own attorney's chair, landing hard on her side with a shriek that echoed off the marble walls. Poetic. 2 deputies picked her up, guided her gently but unceremoniously toward the back. As she passed me, eyes wild, she hissed, "This isn't over, Harper." I didn't flinch, just looked her dead in the eye. "Yeah, it is." She blinked, something in her shattering, finally realizing that she wasn't untouchable, that this rancher, this weed, had outlasted her entire empire of pettiness and control. The doors closed behind her, and just like that, the courtroom was still again. The battle was over, but the war had left marks, and now it was time to rebuild on my terms. The courthouse emptied slowly that afternoon, but the aftershocks, they lasted for weeks. Justice, it turned out, didn't just hit hard. It rippled outward like a stone in a still pond, cracking the image Karen had so carefully crafted and dragging her entire kingdom down with her. Karen Brooks was booked that very night into the county detention facility, where her celebrity didn't buy her much more than a cold cot and a polyester jumpsuit. They shaved off her highlights, and rumor had it, the other inmates started calling her Queen Concrete by day 2. For a woman who once threatened fines over mismatched patio furniture, being told when to shower by a correctional officer must have felt like the 9th circle of hell. She filed an appeal within a week, naturally. Claimed she was mentally compromised from HOA stress. The judge tossed it out faster than a raccoon in a chicken coop, but that wasn't even the worst of it. Her real estate license, once the pride of her LinkedIn profile, was suspended indefinitely. Her face was plastered across the local news under headlines like HOA Tyrant Brought to Justice and Maple Estates Meltdown, President Imprisoned. She was ousted from every neighborhood committee she once dominated like a little suburban. Caesar. And it didn't end there. Greg, her husband, went back to his contracting job, or tried to. Turns out HOA trespasser doesn't look great on a bid sheet. 3 of his contracts were canceled within 48 hours of the verdict. By the end of the month, he was working under someone else's name just to get roofing gigs. When I passed him one day at the gas station, he couldn't even make eye contact. Honestly, I didn't hate the guy. He looked like a man finally free from a very loud prison with French tips and a Bluetooth headset. Mark, the smug HOA board lawyer who once tried to serve me a cease and desist over non-compliant livestock noises, was disbarred within 10 days of the ruling. The footage of him on site holding a bolt cutter while trying to explain due process to a concrete block didn't help his case. Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his sister in Abilene and was doing freelance tax prep. Poetic. He was always better at subtraction than representation. Justin, the HOA security officer, who once flexed like he was guarding Fort Knox, ended up with a $10,000 fine and a 5-year ban from working in security. He now scans barcodes at a warehouse store off the interstate. A few months later, a friend sent me a picture. Justin was wearing a vest that said returns. I printed it out and stuck it on my fridge. But perhaps the most satisfying crumble of all was the HOA itself. Maple Estates was placed under temporary court-appointed oversight. A third-party administrator was brought in to audit their budget, restructure their board, and conduct ethics training. The existing board, every last one of Karen's cronies, was removed. Some resigned in a huff. Others tried to deny knowing anything about the plan, but the receipts, emails, and texts told a different story. Residents started to speak out. Turns out I wasn't the only one Karen had bullied. One woman had been fined for excessive wind chimes. Another had to repaint her front door twice in 1 year because the shade of red was too bold. People came out of the woodwork, emboldened by the verdict, finally ready to reclaim their neighborhood. Maple Estates was no longer a pristine row of fearful conformity. It was in the messy, painful process of becoming an actual community. As for me, I didn't throw any parties. No parade, no "I told you so" banners, though I admit the idea crossed my mind more than once. I was busy. I spent the weeks after the trial restoring my front gate, rebuilding the post they cracked when they dropped that concrete. I installed new steel frame barriers, automatic sensors, and a keypad system that now greets visitors with a deep electronic voice saying, "Welcome to Harper Ranch. You made it legally." I still got calls from reporters. One even asked if I'd consider running for office. I laughed so hard I dropped the phone in a bucket of feed. All I ever wanted was my land, my peace, and my gate open on my terms. Turns out that's exactly what I got. With interest. About a month after the dust settled, I hosted a little get-together at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just some brisket, cold beer, and good company. A few of the Maple Estates folks came out, the ones who'd finally found their voices after Karen's reign collapsed. Turned out some of them were actually decent neighbors once they weren't living in fear of pastel mailbox violations. We stood around the smoker swapping stories, and someone asked half-jokingly, "So Clay, what are you going to do now that you've declared independence from HOA-istan?" I grinned and pointed toward the new custom-welded metal sign I'd had installed by the gate. Big, shiny, and impossible to miss. It read, "You tried to lock me in. Now you're locked out." And below it, a smaller plaque. "Respect boundaries, especially other people's." They all laughed. The kind of laugh that comes when you've survived something stupid and come out smarter on the other side. But that wasn't even the best part. Just a week earlier, I'd received a certified letter. Return address? Karen Brooks. I stared at it like it might explode. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, complete with smudged ink, like she'd stabbed the pen into the paper. "I hope you're satisfied," it read. "Enjoy your little victory. I will rebuild. You haven't heard the last of me." I taped it to the inside of my barn door, right above an old horseshoe and under a novelty sign that says, "No Karens beyond this point." But my favorite moment came one sunny Saturday when I spotted a group of teenagers posing for photos in front of my gate. Apparently the sign had gone viral online. Something about Alpha Rancher defeats HOA with cameras and cowboy logic. I didn't even know I had cowboy logic, but hey, I'll take it. They asked if they could take a selfie with me and the new gate. "You're like kind of a legend, man," one of them said. "My mom showed me your court story. She used to be terrified of our HOA. Now she's on the board." I smiled, tipped my hat, and said, "Well, son, All it takes is a little stubbornness, a lot of cameras, and one woman in a bathrobe falling face first into justice. He nearly dropped his phone laughing. But beyond the jokes, the memes, and the mugshot turned Halloween decoration that someone made of Karen, yes, really, there was something else. Something I didn't expect. Respect. Real, earned, hard-won respect. From neighbors, from locals, even from a few folks at City Hall who'd watched the case unfold like it was a courtroom western. I hadn't meant to start a movement. I just wanted to be left the hell alone. And maybe that's the moral right there. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about fences or bylaws or concrete blocks in the night. It's about reminding people that freedom doesn't come with a committee and privacy isn't negotiable. So now, every morning, I sip my coffee on the porch, watch the sun come up over the east field, and smile. Because the gate's open, the land's quiet, and the only queen on this ranch is a chicken named Cluckabeth, who has more sense than Karen ever did.